Dave first became interested in ham radio while in junior high school, and he got his license while in college in the 70s. But his active radio years began in 1997 when he got a new call sign. He's going to explain what that means in a little while. Dave served as president of the Beloit Amateur Radio Club for several years. Currently, he is emergency coordinator for Rock County Amateur Radio Services and active with the Rock County Repeater Association. Tonight's program is sponsored by the Nancy Parker Endowment Fund. Our fall series also includes 8 other free programs on all sorts of topics. Brochures listing details are available on the brochure beverage table. Please welcome Dave Wendt.
Thank you, Linda. I'm here because I just love amateur radio, and they said this would clear some library fines that I have. So, as she said, I've been interested in amateur radio just about my whole life. I built a radio kit for Christmas when I was about in first grade, and in junior high I just got quite excited about it and started to practice the code, and then I discovered girls. Well, you know, things weren't quite the same. Later on in college, I actually had a friend that got me excited again about amateur radio, and I got licensed at that time. Then career, family, and all that kind of stuff took hold, and after the son grew up, and I got interested in radio again, just a wee bit. And it was partly, again, because of my college friend, that I had gotten in touch with him through the internet, and back and forth. And he had stayed involved with radio, and he dared me to get back into radio. Oh, you know, so I had to get back into it. And he said there was so many different areas of radio. No matter what grabbed my interest, I would have a great time with it. And he was absolutely right. There's just such a wide area of interest, of things that you can explore with it. What I've gotten involved with these days is just other hams with ham radio. Been active with the Beloit Amateur Radio Club. I got involved with amateur communication, or emergency communications. And I'm actually the emergency coordinator for Rock County for amateur radio services. We have repeaters, and that's a word I'll describe a little bit later, and I'm sort of their figurehead of president of that, but there's some other folks here that are behind the scenes that really make it happen. I'm not a public speaker, and I'm not real organized on this, but I'll do the best I can. I'm going to sort of explain about what amateur radio is, and then kind of get into the various terminology, because it is just rich with little buzzwords, keywords, internal type of things. And some of that is just very particular to amateur radio. Some of it is technical jargon. And I'm going to sort of stay away from the technical side and get more into sort of the amateur radio communications type of thing. As I'm going along here, because I'm not a prepared type of speech that goes on and on to a lot of different places, give me questions, but at the time of, while I'm talking here, keep the questions sort of to the topic of the moment, or if I'm talking about SSB, what does SSB mean? You know, something like that. Yeah. Okay. That type of thing. And then later on, when he asked the question, well, I had a cousin that was into amateur radio and he had this big blue thing. What was that? You know, we'll cover that later, because I'll be heading off to horrible tangents otherwise. In the press release thing there, it said 200 years. It's really only about 100 years that amateur radio has been around. But it's really about as long as there's been radio. It has continued to progress. At 100 years ago, it was the leading edge of technology. It's still a very important piece of new technologies. It's just a component of the technologies today. That's what makes radio kind of interesting, is how it fits into and makes use of a lot of different other things. A couple of the books, I've brought a lot of show and tell type of stuff. One of the Bibles is the Amateur Radio Handbook. And this is the only old thing I've brought. There's a lot of old pictures, old people, there's that. This is the Amateur Radio Handbook. This is the one that was published during World War II. It was used actually for training troops and to be radio operators. It's about that thick. This is the 2006, and it's considerably heavier. There's just a lot more technology to work with these days. What's interesting about ham radio is that it's the only hobby, really, that's controlled by the federal government. About the only other one that's kind of come close is pilot's license. And the reason is that the radio spectrum is sort of like a natural resource. And it doesn't respect state lines and stuff. It doesn't respect international borders. So a lot of things are tied into international agreements and stuff. And that using equipment here, I can talk to people in other countries. And so that gets into all kinds of various legal ramifications and stuff. And so how that's dealt with requires a government. The other word here is ham. Let's see, when they're talking about old stuff. Ham is another word for amateur radio operator. The word is so old, we really don't know exactly where it came from. It appears in references to amateur radio operators back as far as 1912. And it was in a context that everyone seemed to know what it meant when we've seen those things, and yet we really have sort of lost what that meaning of it is. There's a lot of different interpretations of that and stuff, but pretty much you can interchange amateur radio and ham radio. Anyways, to become a ham radio operator requires licensing by the government. And this is just a written test now. Once upon a time, it required Morse code. That scared a lot of people away. Once upon a time, it meant you had to drive down to Chicago to take the test. You don't have to do that anymore. You still have to pass a test. It's 35 to 50 multiple choice questions. The pool of those questions is published, so you can study that. They basically are in two categories. One is, what's the rules of the air? There's just, where can you operate? What type of power levels you can operate with? Different things of that nature. And then there's technical understanding. And there's 3 levels of licenses these days. There has been more in the past. The first level is technician. And the technical ability required for that is about junior high science level. If you know the plus and minus side of a battery, you've got a good handle on the level of technology that you can work with for getting that license. The next one is general class, and if you took a science course in high school, you can probably handle what's going on in that. There's a little bit of algebra maybe. Top level is extra class. That is technically that much more difficult. I've taken questions out of that question pool and given it to technicians who have applied for work where I am at. And off the cuff, they'll get about 25% of the questions right. It actually takes a little bit to study for that extra class. The incentive that they have for increasing the level is that you have more places that you can operate. So the other thing about ham radio is the national organization. Talk to the government. The other is we have a national organization. There's about 660,000, 700,000 licensed ham radio operators in this country, and there's about 150,000 that are members of the Amateur Radio Relay League. That's their symbol right on there. It will show up a number of times through there. They put out these handbooks. Number of publications that I have here. It helps us. It does a monthly magazine. It puts out all kinds of technical and fun books on this, sponsors events. It looks after things in Washington to make sure that we have our rights protected for these things. It's a good organization, and it doesn't cost that much to be part of it. Okay, let's get into some of the terms of it. And the first is frequency and wavelength. And my chart up here is it's the frequency allocations. And this is a chart that goes from very low frequency, this is actually audio, to when you start getting a little bit past here, you're actually into infrared. Okay? This is the range of electromagnetic spectrum. And engineer, technical type like to work in logarithmic type of relationships. And so each level on here, each point here is 10 times higher than the other. That's the way that stuff works. And because if it was a linear type of thing, it'd start here and go all the way to Milton. It'd be real hard to, demonstrate the things. Amateur radio gets the bright green stuff on here. We get little tiny spots. Sometimes we have the whole block out all the way through. Sometimes we only have half of it. There's something else going on. That's where we have shared type of things. So at the bottom here, this is just a little bit, actually it's over here. This right here is AM broadcast band. This is from 550 to 1.6 megahertz. Just a little bit above that is our lowest amateur band. We're actually looking and having some experimental stuff that's happening below that, at that side. But right now, we're at that point there. It goes all the way up. We have spots that are all the way up there. So there's a lot of different things. Now, I've been using the word frequency, but there's also the word of wavelength. And frequency is, how fast something is wiggling. Cycles per second, which is now referred to as hertz. But if you think of it as cycles per second, as you increase that number of cycles, you start going faster and faster. How fast we can move, actually, is a fixed constant tied into the speed of light. And so so to get from the same amount of time from this point to this point as we're doing it faster, we have a wavelength aspect to this. And we refer to that sometimes in amateur radio because it goes into an old designation, the way the frequencies were listed, and it also relates out to what works for antenna lengths. So we will refer to 1800 to 1900 or 2000 kilohertz as the 160 meter band. We've got 80 meter, 40 meter type of thing. We get into VHF, we're FM, just a little bit above the FM radio. That's where we have our 2 meter. That's the wavelength, 2 meters long. We start getting higher, we go up to 440, that's 70 centimeters. Just terminology. Let's see. Propagation. This stuff in here is short wave. Let's see, actually this band right here is short wave. This is the stuff that's also medium frequency. It's the stuff that it's that other dial that used to be on radios. You start sort of buying special radios now. This is where you hear the international broadcast. This is where there's a lot of fun stuff happening. And it happens on an international basis because at these frequencies, the radio waves bounce off of the ionosphere. There's layers of the atmosphere that become ionized, and the radio waves bounce off of that, and they can bounce off the Earth, and they go around the Earth. And that's what makes it really interesting. Now, propagation is how well it bounces around. Different times of the year, different times of the day, different seasons of sunspots affect that. Sunspots, you know, you've probably heard about those, that there's these little divots that are on the sun. They affect that ionization that's in our sky, and it happens on an 11-year cycle. We've got observations of sunspots going back probably about 700 years, and it's a pretty well-defined phenomenon. There's peaks of it, and there's valleys of it. And they're pretty well systematic at about 11 years between the peaks. We're right at a minimum right now. So propagation is just not that great. It makes it harder to do the really long distance type of stuff. But it's still fun because you get to practice those skills and wait for the next cycle. Yeah, something like that. Let's see here. Call signs. My call sign is N9GQ. I have a few of my friends here. We got W9DJ, KB9GTB, KC9GTB, and W9MEH over there. When we get our license from the government, we get a call sign. We don't get a handle. Handles are what CVers get. They sort of, you know, they want to be Red Dog, they can be Red Dog. We have a specific call sign that's assigned to us by the government. If we don't like it, we can change it. We can get a vanity type of one. And there's certain rules to how these are applied. In the US, it'll always start with an A, a K, an N, or a W. If the second letter is a K, I live in Alaska. If it's an H, I live in Hawaii. If it's a R, I'm in Puerto Rico. There's a single digit after that, and that is a section of the country. It's kind of like the first number on a zip code. We're in the 9 territory here.
Just taking you a question, the second letter is L for us.
Oh, okay, thank you. The last part is 1, 2, or 3 letters. They don't mean anything. They're just consecutively assigned. There's different protocols for which type of license and stuff, but when you live in another country, you don't have those same US rules. It'll be something different. This is a map of the world, and it covers out what is the beginning of a call sign for different countries. If we go to the Sudan, their call sign would start with ST. If you were in Brazil, it would start with a P, it'd be a PP or a PY. And they may have a number and then their letters. That's how we identify ourselves. We get into phonetics. How do you make sure that the words that you're using are clearly identified, in particular letters? If I say B, P, you know, those start to blend together. And so we have phonetics, and I've got the slide that comes up there once in a while. We use the international one, so it's Alpha, Bravo, Charlie, Delta, Echo. The military one is slightly different. There tends to be some intermixing of it. But we also sometimes use sort of variations of it. On that call sign, those last letters, they're sort of arbitrary. And in order to make a mnemonic for someone to remember you, we'll use phonetics that are just sort of cute. And Ed over there, he identified himself as KC9GTB, and not Germany, Tango, whatever there. It was good time, boy. So we do have a little bit of this handle thing going on, but it's a little bit different. Another secret language we have is called Q codes. And this came out of the ancient days of Morse code, that when you start doing communications, that there's a lot of certain phrasing that starts to get very similar. And if you can condense that down, you can do the communicating a lot faster about things. And the kids are sort of rediscovering that on text messages these days, you know. RU is a R and a U, you know, type of shortcut type of things. And those are used too. A lot of the shortcuts in text messaging you can find in Morse code 100 years ago being used. But Q codes are sort of a special type of one. 3-letter words starting with Q. There's not many of them. So it's a really easy way of identifying that this is a special code that I'm using to ask or tell something. And so there's just sort of, they don't have a specific mnemonic meaning of what each letter is. It just starts with Q, and it's just sort of a list of things. And so some of the common ones is ETH, and that means this is where I live, or where do you live? Because we're talking to someone, we don't know where that signal's coming from. I'm here, where are you? QRZ is someone calling me. QST is an announcement. QX is, this is an experimental type of thing. And so for some of our publications, this is ARRL, and the title of the magazine is QST. Here's an announcement. They also have a magazine of their experimental things, and it's QEX. What are some of the other? QRO is increase power. QRP is decrease your power. What are some of the other ones? Paul, what's another Q signal?
Well, QSY.
QSY, yes. Let's move the frequency a little bit. Yeah.
QRP.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, there's a number of them. Other short terms, as I was saying, a number of things are very similar to text messaging. One of the other ones that is quite interesting is a YL is a young lady. Once a girl gets married, she's no longer a young lady, she's an XYL. So we refer to our wives as XYLs. When we finish a communications, we say 73. It just, in CW, it just sort of sounds nice. Different types of communication. We still use Morse code. It's not legally required to know it, and there was a lot of debate about it disappearing as an official requirement. People said it would die. It's turned out to be contrary. Now that it's not required, people find it more interesting, and they're using it. CW is very old. This is what Samuel Morse was using 150 plus years ago. What's neat about it is it's a very efficient form of communication. It takes a very tiny bit of bandwidth, so you can fit in a lot of signals into a small space. It's also very efficient for getting the signal from here to there. You need a lot less power to do it that way, to get it through. It's easier to build equipment for it. So if you want to build stuff yourself, that's a fun way to go. Voice is probably the main type of communication still. I mentioned SSB, single sideband. It's a type of voice communications that is by far the most popular. The reason being, as I mentioned, we have AM broadcasting, amplitude modulation, and that's what our radios listen to. That works quite well, and if you can have the radio kind of tuned close, it's good. Sideband requires a bit more technology in the radio and stuff, and in the transmitter, but it's 4 times more efficient for that voice communications. And if I can get a signal out and use only 1/4 of the amount of energy to do that, hey, that really works. Digital. Oh, this is just going by leaps and bounds. There's just so many different ways of doing digital stuff. You can do digital voice. There's just a number of different mechanisms. And what's really great about it is there are techniques that allow the digital to actually be, when you listen to the noise on the radio, you can't even hear that signal. It is so down low that the computer is still able to pick it out. It's absolutely amazing type of stuff. Video, you had asked earlier about video. There's some of that going on, but actually video is sort of a declining type of thing in amateur radio because you can digitize it and it just becomes another piece of the digital type of information. To be able to send pictures though is very important. Different types of communications. DX is a phrase referring to distance. It's a shortened phrase, and you're trying to talk to people, as far away as you can. Hey, I got this radio. How far does it reach out? So DX refers to talking to people in the other countries. Contests. What's an excuse for reusing your radio? Let's make as many contacts with other people as we can that are sitting in a lighthouse today, or sitting in an island, or something like that, or all from the state of Wisconsin. There's entire magazines devoted to contests. There's that many going on all the time. Events. Like I said, going from a lighthouse, different states, countries. The big event though, the high holiday of amateur radio is Field Day. This is the last full weekend in June, and I've got all kinds of pictures on it. That's me actually, on Field Day a year ago. And the purpose of Field Day is to take your radios and go out in a field and to be able to operate off of power that is not connected to the main utility system and make as many contacts as you can over a 24-hour period. And it's done across the nation, across North America. They have a different time than it's done over in Europe. But it's a fun time. And locally, we do this at the last couple of years. We've been doing this at the Janesville Firefighters Training Center out County F, where all the county buildings are. It's a wonderful location for that. Great time. Wonderful location for that. Great time. Another type of thing that we're doing on a regular basis is called nets. And this is where a whole bunch of us will talk together. Because everyone can transmit and receive at this, we have to take turns. And so nets are all about taking turns. And it's a good way to practice for emergency type of situations. It's a good way to share information, to take turns to be able to talk. And the other thing is emergency operations. Written right into why we are allowed to operate is to have a resource pool of trained radio operators for the time of emergency. That's right in the first paragraph of the rules of regulations that the government makes us read. We know how to connect things up. We know how to communicate. And we don't have to use the infrastructure in order to make that happen. And so that one of the things that's been up there is when all else fails, amateur radio knows how to communicate. Special interest areas. This is where it just gets real interesting. Clubs. We got the Beloit Amateur Radio Club. This is the national organization that I was talking about. There's clubs that are specific, that deal with maybe DX, maybe with low power operation. Some of them are ones that meet in person at a particular location. They may meet on a regular basis on the air and get together every Sunday afternoon at 2 o'clock at this particular frequency and have a net and talk all about Heathkit radios that they happen to have. You know, it's a very particular type of interest. And they may do this over the net. Yahoo groups, there are news groups, there's a number of different mechanisms to do that through the net these days, along with a website type of thing. Another special interest area is DX, as I was saying, about making contacts with as many countries and different things. The UN has, I don't know, maybe about 125, 150 different countries as members now. In terms of DX entities for getting, I've worked every country in the world. There's 336 for amateur radio. They start counting every single rock that's in the ocean, a place. And, well, no one lives on that rock. Let's send a bunch of guys out there and put them in a tent and a generator and a couple of strings of wire up there and let them go at it for a while and have fun. They just have a ball, and that's a de-expedition. I had mentioned the word repeater before. We have a repeater association here. What that is it's about maybe 40-year-old technology. It's the stuff that this came out of. This is just a little tiny radio. It's really hard to make radio contact with another radio. But if I talk to something that's high up, when we're into these frequencies, it's line of sight type of thing, so they want towers that are high up. So I'm standing here, I can talk to that tower, it retransmits it to something else. And so we've got several repeaters in this area. We get space from the county to use some tower space from them. They've been very good to us. And it's a superb way, because that way I can use an amateur radio type of cell phone. It's a walkie-talkie, also more often referred to as an HT, handy-talkie, that I can talk to that repeater and talk to the area then. It's a great way for staying in touch. The repeater we have here covers easily the entire county and quite a bit further, actually. Antennas. Put a wire in the air and grab a signal. Well, it could be any old wire, could be something kind of special. When that type of wire just poking out of that is transmitting, you could kind of think about it as just a bubble of uniform signal strength. It's going out in all directions. And if I'm talking to her over there, all that signal going out over here is kind of wasted. So if I can figure out with this antenna system to make all my signal go this way and none of it go this way, with the same amount of power coming out of the radio, I have twice as much power going to her. Wow. And it didn't take any more energy out of here. That's the whole science behind what you want to have going with antennas. And there's just all kinds of ways you can string up an antenna to make that sort of thing happen. That you want to make it more and more directive to get to a particular spot. Or maybe not directive, but maybe more efficient across a very wide frequency, so that I can be at here, 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 and here, and it still works very efficiently. Number of different antennas. Low power, that's where I have fun at. We are allowed to operate with, well, I don't know, 1,500 watts. You know, it's a huge amount of power. Low power is at 5-watt level, and to be able to work a quarter of the way around the world right now, and with voice, which is a wide type of signal, with a lousy propagation. Hey, that's really exciting. 5 watts, I mean, that's the power from a night light, you know? And I'm talking to someone a quarter of the way around the world. Exciting stuff. Let's see, halfway through, and on my second page here. We're doing pretty good. Satellites, space communication. There's been over 50 amateur radio satellites. There's probably about a half dozen of them out there these days. There's also amateur radio stations, station on the International Space Station. Moon bounce, Earth-Moon, Earth communications. It's not an overly practical type of thing, but neither is hiking up to the top of Mount Everest. It's just one of those things. You can do it, so why not? And the idea is that you take a signal and you transmit, and you bounce it off the moon, and it comes down someplace else. And amazing stuff. Fox hunting. This is taking a transmitter and hiding it, and having the other guys try and find it with their radios. Now we have to do some directive type of things. We have to do some creative type of stuff to not hear the interference. Maybe we do some things with it being on, being off. This is a whole interest area. And you can start to see, well, maybe that might be good for tracking down interference. Maybe it would be good for tracking down loss type of things. Quite interesting stuff. Software-defined radio. I've got a little example of this to show you later, but this is an expanding area of radio that's very fascinating. That you take the radio signal, and right now you move it down, you take a piece of this spectrum, a little slice of it, and you move that slice down to the audio portion, and you still keep it a wide chunk, and then you use the computer sound card to do the tuning and processing of it and turn it into something that you can intelligently deal with. As this is progressing, it's a wider and wider chunk of the bandwidth that it's doing, and you don't have to use a computer sound card. You may use a special chip that is also wider and wider. It's very much a developing technology. You end up with radios that they don't have any knobs. It's things that you're clicking on in the computer. Fascinating. Antique radios. I've got a few pictures of old stuff. As I was saying, a lot of us are mature when we got into radio finally, and we may remember a radio that we lusted after when we were young, and so we find one and we shine up the knobs and have some fun playing with it. You know, an old Heathkit type of thing. There's people that collect those and talk on the air on a regular basis. It's an opportunity to learn more about electronics. Electronics is an interesting area, and you can build your own stuff. There's experimental electronics. This is a software-defined radio, and the circuitry is not particularly sophisticated in itself. But one of the aspects of it is a patented, a very recent patent of detection method going on in it, called a Taillow detector. And it's a very simple chunk of electronics, but it's a very unique application, and it was developed entirely by amateur radio operators. Microwaves. As we start getting into this higher frequency type of stuff, this wavelength gets tinier and tinier and tinier and tinier, and A lot of interesting challenges. The Wi-Fi stuff we have, that's at 2.4 gigahertz. Amateur radio can work in that, and much higher, much higher. I mean, the wavelength is like that on that stuff. Packet radio. This is a form of networking, like we've got Ethernet connections and internet connections that are going on. So packet radio was that type of thing. The packet radio itself has sort of declined in popularity. It was very much like the bulletin boards were 15, 20 years ago. That you would connect to it, you could download files, leave messages on it. A lot of internet type of things have replaced that. However, it's using repeaters, it's using networking type of things, and it's still very useful to do other type of packet or chunks of information stuff. One of these is called WinLink, that allows our computer to connect up through this and send email independent of the internet. It'll jump over to the internet and then jump off again. This has amazing stuff for emergency communications. Another aspect of packet radio is APRS, Automatic Position Reporting System. And this is a messaging that's based on GPS, a global positioning system, along with just text messaging also can take place with it. I run one of these in my car, and it transmits a little signal that's picked up by amateur radio towers around, and they pass this signal along. And my wife Linda is able to look on the computer, and she can see that my car position is at a particular location. We'll just let this go into screensaver again. Okay. Let's see here. Beacons. That's another area of just transmitting a signal and seeing who can hear it. That gets into variations. Not only, the beacon is interesting, useful for seeing if we have that propagation, whether I can actually make a signal get from here to a particular location. There's various ones that are at locations. They transmit on a time stamp type of basis, and they will decrease their power. There's others that are working with what's called QRS. Remember the Q signals? QRS means go slower. QRSS is super slow. And they will do a 1 second DIT, a 3 second DA for Morse code. It's just tediously slow. It can take, you know, a half hour to just exchange very crude information. But it allows you to have signals that are very, very low. You can just keep listening, and you don't have to have the entire signal, just every once in a while, and that's enough to decode that. And you can use extraordinarily low powers. I was talking about my QRP, low power radios. We do that in 5 watts. These QRSS guys, they can go halfway around the world and operate with microwatts. Microwatts. I mean, it's, you know, it isn't even enough to make an LED light up. You know, this is amazing stuff. Variation of this is called whisper, and using computers to automatically sort of respond to this and track this. And a variation of that is meteor bouncing. Remember I was talking about how the signal bounces off of ionized atmosphere? Well, we have all kinds of meteors. There is big meteors. We might see one on a summer night when we're sitting outside. But there's all kinds of small ones that are much more common, you know, the grain of sand type of stuff. And that's enough that you can actually bounce a signal off of. And one of the people that's developed programs to dealing with that is actually a Nobel laureate that developed the software and techniques for that. Then working with the youth, Boy Scouts. I've got a brochure back there. There's a merit badge, and always trying to get more kids interested in this. Now I was going to talk about emergency operations. ARES and RACES. There was a question before, what is ARES? It's Amateur Radio Emergency Service. And this is an organization that is operated by the ARRL. The FCC has a similar type of program called RACES, Radio Amateur Civilian Emergency Services. Some places it will be just the RACES organization, some places it will be the ARES. In Wisconsin, they are operated together as a single operation. We have a state organization, there's a state structure, gets into district structures, then down to the county level. And I'm the guy for Rock County. We have radio stations that we have an amateur radio station in the Rock County Emergency Operations Center. When there's an emergency, you know, if a tornado were to go through here, where do our leaders get together? They've got a whole plan for that. They've got a place that they go to, an emergency operations center. They got computers, communication stuff, and they have a ham radio station in there. And they know me. We've done things. We also have radio stations in Mercy Hospital, Beloit Hospital, Edgerton Hospital. We did an exercise this past summer where we had all three hospitals and the Emergency Operations Center all talking together just to test this out using ham radio. We've got a ham radio setup in the 911 center. We've got some antennas at the Beloit fire station. We've got stuff set up in a number of different ways for this. We're tied into the Weather Service. Tomorrow evening I'll be going over to Sullivan, where National Weather Station is for this section of the country. And we use our repeater tower to relay information. Reason for that is the Weather Bureau wants to have ground-based observations of weather. They have this marvelous radar stuff these days. But the Earth is curved, or I mean, you know, it's round. And so that radar signal, it shoots off and it just keeps going straight on out. And so they're starting to look higher up and higher up. And so the further you are away, the more interested they are in what's actually happened in the ground. And it's happened a number of times that where they see something that's real interesting, looks like a tornado in one spot, it's actually about 4 miles away on the ground where it's actually tearing stuff up. And so ground-based observations are very important to them. And we have structures for dealing with that. What else here? Hurricanes. Well, we don't have hurricanes here. We got tornadoes and stuff. But there are nets that go into action when there is hurricanes, because it wipes out communications potentially in a very large area. I've got some stuff for Katrina and stuff. Locally, we've got the repeaters. We've got ARES RACES. We got the Beloit Amateur Radio Club meets the first Monday of the month, 7:30 p.m. at the Beloit Fire Station number 1. If you want to find out about ham radio stuff here in Rock County, we've got a website. What do you think that website is? rockhamradio.com. One word, rockhamradio. Say it again, rockhamradio.com. Yeah. We get involved with the local events. We have the field day. Last couple of years we've helped out for that tub run in June when they have 2,000 motorcycles doing a tour of Rock County. They had a problem with those motorcycles getting lost. Oh my God. We got involved and have helped them with their communications to let them know at intersections a couple minutes prior to that they're going to be coming through, using the automatic position reporting system, using operators using their handhelds, what they have in their cars, talking through the repeater, communicating. We are able to help out quite a bit with that. Hamfest. This past weekend in Belvedere, Illinois, there was a Hamfest. Hamfests are sort of flea markets that are very specialized for electronics and ham radio. Car enthusiasts have things with cars. This is for ham radio. It has opportunities of learning about radio. They'll have exams for radio. They'll have some training sessions sometimes. It's a good way to see your fellow hams. We have emergency training stuff that we're doing with Aries Races. We're required to take FEMA courses. Part of what happens in an emergency is you don't want to have everyone running around what to do, what to do, what to do. You really need to have people with particular tasks and to get the job done. And so that's what the FEMA stuff is about. It's incident command, and who's going to be doing what, and how the structure will be applied, and where you're going to fit into it. Because if you know what the rules of the game are, it's much easier to participate in that game. We have a simulated emergency test coming up. This is a national event sponsored by the ARRL, and Wisconsin's been a leader in participation in that. So that's most of the talking stuff. I've gone about 50 minutes here, and I'm going to play a little bit of show and tell now with some of the stuff here, and then we'll go into questions. I waved this once already. This is a software-defined radio. This is a kit radio. It was not a commercial type of one. It was just some guys who were real interested. There was an article in the magazine about it, and it's a little bit of an organization that put it together. It's about 25 bucks to do this thing. It is, it's got on the white wire there, that's an antenna connection. The black wire plugs into the microphone input on the computer, and it's got a USB connection on there. That's really just for power on it. And it's relatively simple electronics on the thing. And I'm going to show you what it does. And that's just listening to the microphone on here right now. What I'm going to do is play a file. And this is from an event called Straight Key Night. And this is done New Year's Day, New Year's Eve. And the idea is for people to operate CW, Morse code, using a simple type of straight key. And that little red arrow, that's where I'm receiving right now. In all of these, you can see that. It looks like Morse code. These are all different things. This is a swath of the band that is coming through. But I have my cursor just so if I wanted to listen to that signal, I click there. I click there. I tune it with the mouse on here. This is a program that was written by a ham. There's no charge for it. It's just amazing type of stuff. There's no knobs on this radio. It's all electronic. This is software-defined radio. Because I'm playing through the audio card on the computer, it's treating it like an audio file. And that's what I can actually save it. That's what I've done, and I'm just playing it back. This is a segment of the band where there isn't any voice, so we don't have any voice signals. So that's software-defined radio. Let's see. This is some propaganda piece from
Imagine
the
sitting in your room talking to people in
ARRL.
Imagine hearing world events as they happen. Listening to far-off places with strange names. Imagine hearing a voice crackle through the air calling you. Come, talk, be a friend. It's your world out there. Say hello.
Hello, I am WG4Y.
Hi, I'm KB1KJC. That's Kilo Bravo 1, Kilo Juliet Charlie.
Early attempts at sending voices over the air were unintelligible, but on December 24th, 1906, Reginald Fessenden shocked radio operators all across the North Atlantic who heard his voice coming from their radios, saying hello to them and wishing them Merry Christmas. Fessenden's historic feat caused inquisitive hobbyists to join those experimenting with this new technology called radio. They were and are still called amateur radio operators. We invite you to discover what amateur radio offers in the 21st century.
Hello.
Jack, W8ISH. Hello.
Making friends around the world, talking to another ham beat orbiting satellite, or swapping call signs with hams in over 100 countries in a single weekend. Volunteers save lives as part of their involvement in an emergency response. Talking from Chicago to the Carolinas with a pocket-sized handheld radio. This unique mix of fun, public service, and convenience is amateur radio. Amateur radio operators come from all walks of life. Rock stars, missionaries, astronauts, doctors, students, politicians, truck drivers, and just plain folks. They're all ages, income levels, and nationalities. Amateur radio operators have continued to be in the forefront of developing technologies years in advance of when they're rolled out to the public. FM, television, mobile telephones, and VoIP technologies were all used by amateur radio operators years ahead of the public. Whether the preference is Morse code, voice communication, or computerized messages, amateur radio is where an average person can, using their own ear, talk freely across town or around the world to others.
Hello.
Hello, I am DL1 Media Delta Lima 1 Bravo Delta Florida.
Basic study materials for passing the FCC test and getting your first license usually cost less than $40. There are also license classes held by many local groups for people who want more personal help. If possible, taking part in one of these classes is the best way to go, but there's even an online course you can take if you prefer. Once you have your first license, it usually costs less than $200 to get your first radio and start saying hello. Founded in 1914, the 150,000-member American Radio Relay League is the national association for amateur radio in the USA. Other countries have their own national organizations. The ARRL is a primary source of information about what is going on in the ham radio world. It provides books, news, support, and information for individuals and clubs. For 100 years, the magic of human voice over the radio has brought imaginations to life. It opened a whole new era of human communication. It's your world. Get on the radio and say hello. To learn more, go to www.helloradio.org.
Okay, I had a longer Katrina one, but we're just about out of time here. I brought a couple of radios here. I showed you the software-defined radio. This is another low-power radio kit that I put together. This is called a Rockmite. And this is a full transceiver. Works on 40 meters, CW, and very expensive container for it. This is another kit that I put together. This does both Morse code and voice, single sideband for 40 meters. I've made a lot of contacts with that thing, had a lot of fun. This is another low power radio. This one is a kit type of radio. I didn't put this one together. It's a very sophisticated radio. It works on many bands, it's very agile, and it's a very sensitive one. It's also very easy to set up. It has a self-contained battery in it. You hook a microphone to it, you hook an antenna to it. It's got an antenna tuner in it, and you can be on the air very quickly. This is a higher end radio. This one does they refer to it as DC to light. It does all the way down to from low frequency to UHF. It transmits with 100 watts of power. It has a color LCD screen on it. Any mode that you can think of, it can transmit. You may have to hook a computer to it to receive some of the things. For some, like teletype, you can actually make it show up on its little screen on the thing. Oh, my walkie-talkie there. Questions? Either I bored you to death or answered them all.
Where do you go now to take a test?
You don't have to go very far at all. I believe at one of the churches here on October 17th, they'll be giving some exams. Quarterly, they're given here in Janesville.
Is that posted online?
Yes, Carl has that on the website.
Radio has it listed on their main page.
Yeah, rockhamradio.com. It lists out, as I mentioned before, it used to be that you had to go down to the FCC office in Chicago. No longer required. It requires 3 volunteer examiners. These are ham radio operators that have volunteered their time. They've been certified. They know the rules of the game in order to give exams in a fair manner. And there's a group here in town that is doing it. It's not a club type of thing. It's just a group of guys that feel the need for doing that. They're given, I think, almost on a monthly basis down in Rockford. Used to be at the Loves Park Library. I'm not sure where they're at now. In Madison, they do it on a monthly basis. I think it's at the Space Place on Park Street. They also have at least annual, if not semi-annual courses that you can take a rather intensive 1 or 2 day course and learn enough to take the exam at the end of that course. It doesn't take much to get that technician's license. It's a good way to get started.
The online courses.
There's online courses for that. I can't remember the name of the book. They keep sort of changing it. But it's a $20 book. You get it from the ARRL, ARRL.org. I think there's some brochures that cover it off in back there. If you go through that book, you know, you can spend 2 weeks of evenings sort of reading through it. Like I said, a certain portion of it is rules of the game, and a portion is just a little bit of technology. And it's not very hard. Technician's license is 35 questions, multiple choice. Kids have memorized all the questions for extra class, you know, the engineering type thing, and have passed. So, you know, if kids can do it. So it's not that hard. And if you talk to us, we can help you out with that. Come to one of the meetings of the Floyd Club. Yeah. Aries Races, I didn't mention the meeting for that. We meet on the 4th Monday of the month at 7:30 p.m. at the Red Cross building here in Janesville. That's online too, rockhamradio.com.
Is it fire station number 1?
Fire station number 1. That's the one that's across the street from Fairbanks Morse. Other questions? Yes, Paul.
On those slides that keep sliding by, there's
Yeah.
a nice old boat anchor radio. You might explain what boat anchor means.
Okay,
With that glowing tube and stuff. Where'd you get that picture from?
Oh, I don't know. These are just sort of ones that I grabbed off that I felt friendly with.
Grabbed
You know,
off
so-
the net and
Yeah.
places like that.
Okay. Boat anchors. Radios used to have some mass to them with the vacuum tubes. Building electronics was a very mechanical art. There was just considerable size, metalworking skills involved, and these things were quite massive, and they were heavy. And If you attached it to a sailing vessel, you would prevent it from moving. Wonderful boat anchors.
This is Dayton, isn't it?
That's Dayton, yeah. That's one of the trips that we had down there. Dayton is the ultimate ham fest. About 20,000 people get together, giant flea markets, all kinds of stuff going on. The ham stations that are shown here are a number of people from around town. This is their stations. They don't know that I'm publicly displaying this. But that's okay. People like to show off their ham radio stations. Shack is the euphemism that's typically referred to. This is from Field Day. Paul did some wonderful pictures this year. He did this picture, the picture of me on the poster, Paul did. I meant to give you credit for that. He did wonderful photography. I just like this one. AWL is always, and from emergency, always promoting when all else fails. Well, someone modified it to a little bit more of a Homer Simpson type of thing. But, you know, hey, it's working with what you got. Sometimes it takes things. That's a high power transmitter. It still works out that tubes are very good for transmitting with. Once you start getting into higher power, tubes are not that much less efficient than solid state devices, and they are much more forgiving about not having things quite right. And once in a while, us guys that just sort of are connecting things together, we haven't quite got it right. And so the tubes are actually not a bad way to go.
Our antennas fall down.
Yeah, things happen, you know, and they're much more, these pictures of guys out in the fields connecting up wires, this is Field Day. That was, I think most of the pictures I have from, there's that chart that's on the wall over there. This one is so condensed it doesn't show up very well what it is. It's not really readable.
What's the advantage of an extra class license?
The incentive is that you have a little bit more room to operate.
Prestige.
Yeah.
There's one
This is a chart of the different bands that we have. This is the wavelengths down here. And the different bands on there are how much you get to use with more license capability. So the there isn't even a technician that they can only operate a little bit of 10 meters and a little bit of down there. But the white spaces, those are spots that only the extra class can operate. So you just get a little bit more free money. And it doesn't cost that much.
And also, there's fewer people down there, so the bands aren't as congested. So if a lot of people, if they want to work distance stations, DX and things like that, the lower 25 kilohertz of each band.
Right, crowded band
where the
conditions,
stuff
when
is
conditions
there.
are good, is always a problem. And you saw how crowded it looked on that software-defined radio. There was just signals bounced in rather tight in there. A little bit more space, a little bit easier to make a contact if it's not quite as crowded. So that's the advantage there. Other questions? Yes?
How many people in here are hams? How many are hams? Just curious.
What's your call sign?
K9 EFE. Easy, friendly, and efficient.
Thank you. And yours?
WA9 WCP.
WCP. Glad to have you here this evening. So I didn't explain much to a few of you. Norm, I want to see you at one of those exam sessions, taking that exam now.
What's it cost to take an exam now?
Not much more than that.
15, isn't
Is it that much?
And no more than
It's not much more than a token fee, which it may be up to $15.
The cost of pushing the papers.
Yeah, and it lasts for 10 years. And if you even let it expire, they give you another 2 years before they really take it away from you. So, I mean, that comes down to maybe $1.50 a year on the cost of your license. Wow. Car license ain't that cheap. Other questions? Well, thank you, Linda, for having me. I had fun talking about one of my favorite topics.